Hi, welcome to the Voice of Bold Business Radio. I am your host, Jess Dewell. Today, you are listening to Quantum Results in Real Time. This is the right place for conversations about current problems and needs we as business leaders face and the things that we want to tackle to improve and to change. The Voice of Bold Business Radio hosts discussions and interviews about what it means to develop culture and build organizational tenacity. Today, we have special guests, Allan and Dianne Collins, and I'm going to introduce them to you in just a minute. What I would like to say first is that the book, Do You Quantum Think, is something that has improved not only my business results, but my personal results in relationship with everything. Okay. The relationship with everything. More awareness, taking the awareness scale that I use, the work that I am actively doing, the conscious effort putting into being aware, it takes it to a new level with mastery. And that is what my goal with today's conversation with Dianne and Allan is all about. What can we do to get to that next level? How do we maximize that next level? How do we choose it consciously all the time for mastery? I'm going to introduce you now to Dianne Collins, who is the leading authority in New Worldview thinking, and she is the author of 6-time award-winning bestseller, Do You Quantum Think? She is a visionary thinker, writer, creator, and producer, and she is passionate about showing people new ways of seeing that can make their life sublime. Also with us today is Master Quantum Think coach Allan Collins, who emanates his natural inclination to have people be successful in all areas of their lives. He is exceptionally talented and intuitive and touches directly on what is most significant for people, which instantly can connect them to their power and to be able to go forward, living in the moment and living their dream. You will meet them right after this.
Welcome to the Voice of Bold Business, the show that provides everything smart leaders need to evaluate situations, build relationships, and create solutions. Jessica Dewell candidly talks about the skills necessary to build tenacity and do more with less. And now, here's Jessica.
So we set a big intention for this show, didn't we? Here we are talking in the room. We're talking about confidence. We're talking about this need of mastery in our conversations prior to the show. And I think we need to start with a definition of mastery. In the world of quantum think, what does mastery actually mean?
To me, it means being able to be in command, not necessarily in control. And it's a very important distinction because control, you're trying to push and force and shove. And that's really what we lovingly call the old world, industrial age worldview with all the militaristic language. Whereas from a quantum worldview, we're talking about the wording like organic, being in the flow, the kind of thing that you say a lot, Jess. We know that whatever happens on this show, it's exactly the right thing. So when you're talking about mastery, though, it's more precise in the work that we do in QuantumThink. And that is learning to master, actually the mantra of QuantumThink, official, unofficial, master your mind, master your life, learn about how our inner states work. It's really about being in command and having that certainty. You can access that state of command of yourself, regardless of circumstances. What would you say, Allan?
Two types of mastery. There's the mastery in the circumstantial world, where you're mastering a career or you're mastering a sport or you're mastering something that you're doing. In the context of quantum think, as Dianne has been putting it forth, being able to make a distinction between my thoughts that are just coming through me, and being able to observe them and be able to think, sort of make a distinction between thoughts and thinking, to be able to think about them and see the thoughts and have a choice. And the mastery lives in the choice where you can choose to go with the thought, or you can stop and think about it. And at that point, you would have a choice about creating something else if you wished. That is a level of personal mastery that I work on for myself. And it's not easy because you got to be very aware at every moment, really, because thoughts are coming in thousands of seconds. It does take a lot of awareness, but that's part of the mastery because you're gaining self-awareness.
I have 3 levels of awareness that I talk about. First, we recognize what happened when it's over. Oh, we did that again. Really, this always turns out that way. Wow, I wonder if I could recreate this because it was so amazing.
Before you give us the other two, Jess, we have these clients that were so adorable. I mean, they're very smart in Manila, Philippines. They call that a post QT moment. So the quantum thing, you're aware of the moment, but what you're talking about, oh, that happened post QT.
Perfect, because it happens after. It's like, oh, now there was something I need to be aware of, and I didn't know I needed to be aware of it. So that second level is now we're in the middle of it. And usually people recognize when they're in the middle of it, not when it's a good thing, but it's a bad thing. Oh, I'm in the middle of it. Here I go again. Here this is happening again. I guess I'm in for the ride. The awareness changes. We have this new aha moment that when we grasp onto, we can go, wow, how neat is this that we actually have some sort of control? And Allan, when you started talking about the distinction of thoughts versus thinking, that this first shows up. And it's interesting to watch in groups. And I know you guys do a lot with this as well in groups. And the third is that moment of mastery, as you both described it, where we have that moment that we can draw out, and it might seem really long, even though it is a microsecond of having the choice, and everything slows down and it becomes clear, and then you recognize you have the choice before anything happens. So you can go for the ride you've always been on. You can also go someplace else.
That third way that you just mentioned, athletes would call that being in the zone. When everything slows down. There was an ad one time in Miami Herald for the tennis tournaments that are here in Miami. The ad said, on a good day, it looks like a beach ball. And that's really like the slowing down. A beach ball coming over the net, you would have all the time in the world to be able to get to it and put it exactly where you want it, as opposed to a tennis ball coming at you at Mach 1 speed.
The thing about mastery is you have to choose it consciously. Do you want to live a masterful life or not? And you always have another chance, another chance, another chance to choose a life of mastery. So what does it mean? And we have a distinction in QuantumThink, which is a set of 21 distinctions in new thinking, is called success to mastery on a good day. So you could say that level of being in the zone is circumstantial. Like you woke up, you were in a good mood, you felt good, the sun is out, there's no wind on the tennis court, whatever it is. But what we're talking about mastery is more like a martial arts master. Mastery is what we say, knowing what to do in the moment and doing it with full confidence, without trepidation. You always have a little bit of something going on about the unknown. It's a context, moving from success to mastery. Mastery is a context, a state that you operate from. So even when it's not going well, and you were talking about your husband saying, well, you're always confident, Jess, even when it looks like you're not, because you have that state of being. And so when you talk about, well, what is it to live in your business, to operate in your business, in your life from a state of mastery? That's what it is. It's a context so that no matter what's going on, as Allan said, you're able to create a relationship with the circumstances that's always in that heightened state of awareness, even when everything isn't going all, smooth and hunky-dory.
When things are not going hunky-dory, we tend to revert quickly and faster than we even realize back to patterns that have gotten us through before. And what I'm taking away from both of you is that we must let those go. We must say those aren't going to help right now in this moment to maintain this space, this place of showing up in the moment in mastery. How do we start to change the way we've been taught to think and act?
It's really all comes down to awareness. We know when we're off. We don't need any special training to know when we're off. Well, maybe some people do, but for the most part, if people have any sense of awareness at all, they know when they're off. You can't really change the thought because it's already there. It gets there before you do. From a QuantumThink perspective, it's about altering your relationship with the thought, not trying to change the thought or fix the thought or wish you didn't have the thought or whatever you want to do with the thought. It's not about any of that. It's recognizing what we call a least action pathway, an automatic mechanical thought that we didn't choose. We wouldn't choose to have a negative thought about ourselves, and we absolutely wouldn't choose to have a negative thought about a good friend, a family member, a husband, a child, or anything like that. So we're not choosing these thoughts. They're just coming through us. We're having them, but we're not choosing them. Once you see that and you recognize it for what it is, it goes back to, Jess, what you said, which is your second level of awareness, where you are aware in the moment that this is not going to get you what you want. At that point, you can consciously choose what thought you want. We call it an intent, but what thought you actually want to have for the relationship you happen to be in at that moment, whether it's with yourself or another.
People are very much aware today of your intent, your intentions for your business results, and all of that. We make a distinction between positive thinking and quantum thinking. Positive thinking, you're in the moment, you become aware, and you have a thought, I don't know if I can reach my business goal this year or this quarter. Let's make it a little shorter. Then you realize that our habits of thinking do condition our state and give rise to what we emanate, what we resonate, what we attract. It guides the trajectory of our actions. So we don't want to be living in that state of, I don't think I can do it, right? Then you say, oh no, I can do it. You go from, I don't know if I can do it to, oh yes, I can do it, I can do it, I can do it, right? But you're still holding in your state of being, in your resonant field, and I'm using a little bit quantum technical language, you're holding that negative thought as if there's some fixed reality about it. Allan says it's like putting jelly on top of peanut butter, taking a bite and pretending the peanut butter's not there. So if you have a positive thought or a positive affirmation, you're trying to cover it up, the thought that you're really holding in your state of being. Quantum thinking, you realize, very important, fundamental to the quantum worldview. There's no fixed and absolute reality. There's no way that he is, she is, my business is, the economy is, the government is, the media is. That is, you could say, a quantum fact, that everything is energy in flux, informed by intelligence, and everything is always shifting and changing. And we're the focal point. We've been blessed by human birth with the ability to focus in and make a reality where it's infinite possibility. So what are we going to focus in on? It's like, what are you going to click on the internet? That becomes your reality in that moment. It's the same thing. What thought are you going to click on? We know that whatever negative thought we have been habituating, even if we've been doing it for years, even if you can point to, but he really is stubborn, or whatever you're making someone, ising someone, we know as quantum thinkers, that is not the absolute truth fixed in stone for all time. That is not, as you referred to, Jess, earlier, it's not a helpful thought. So let's interrupt that, call it just a thought. As Allan said, we call it least action pathway, the least creative action, the least conscious action, the way the energy goes, because it's been that route before, like a rut. And do what? Create intent. And this is where it becomes valuable to make this distinction, that when you create an intent from that place of awareness, it has power, because you know you are the one generating the context for a new trajectory for your business, for your actions, for your relationships.
when we were having a conversation a couple of weeks ago, you were talking about those pathways and the Olympics were on. And so you were talking about it like the luge, where it's this super fast track because as you go down, it's melting and refreezing and it's entrenched, you said. There's a rut there. What you were talking about in the brain, please jump in at any point and take over because you know way more about this than I do, Dianne. Is it the mylar around our neural pathways?
It's called myelinated, but I'm not a brain expert, but that's what it's called.
You've got more language than I do. And
Okay.
so, and it encases all the way around like these tunnels. So it's almost like watching an ant colony where you can look in and see all of the different ways that these ants have decided to come together for their reality. And at any point in time, any one of those ants can go, I'm going to make a new path. We have the ability to do that. If I've got to make this new pathway and I choose to make a new tunnel, maybe it's going to be awkward at first. Can I start with a positive thought? Or do I really have to surrender to whatever that negative thought is and go, yeah, you're here. And yeah, I'm trying to cover you up. How about if you come to my table and let's just be together so we can figure out how to be together?
The answer to your question is no, we don't have to do that. Quantum reality, what you focus on expands, E equals MC squared. What you energize with your thoughts, you're adding mass to. So no, we're not going to say, oh, we're stuck here. That's why I borrow that term actually from science, least action pathway, so that you could just label it. And for us, it's like with our clients, oh, that's just a least action pathway. No meaning to it, no analysis. That's the old worldview of analysis and separation. And what happened to me and what did my teacher tell me when I was 4 years old? No, we don't do that. We just
I'm
go,
so glad.
this is the quantum leap, a literal quantum leap in consciousness and your thinking. That's how life occurs in quantum leaps. Now, that's how our thoughts, we're always jumping from one place to another. The difference is we're not doing it consciously. So when you see a least action pathway, that negative thought, I say a lot of them, they're not even ours. We're picking them up from the intel surrounding us in the mind field or the culture or whatever it is, doesn't matter, past life, if you believe in that. It's a nanosecond. It's like an instantaneous shift as soon as you see it. And then you go to, okay, what was my intent again? And you generate something that you do want. There's a famous quote from Buckminster Fuller, who was a very, very famous and respected design scientist in the 20th century. And he said, instead of trying to fix the system that you do have that's not working, create a new system that displaces the old one. So in a way, we're doing that mini wise. It's not like you're monitoring every thought you have. When you start to live this way, it's just natural. It's just like, oh, so no, you don't have to dwell in it. No.
Example actually going on right now with one of our clients is a department within a big company and dealing with the HR department, which is a really good example because the HR department is going by the book. They're going to follow the rules and they're going to do exactly what the book says. But what the book says isn't actually in support of my client. It's not working for them. The rules are too strict and they're not allowing my client to do what he needs to do. The HR people are stuck here because they're going by the book. And they're actually scared to not go by the book because they could lose their job. And they're frightened. It doesn't matter to him at all. So what we said was, okay, let's have an intent for this group of people that they feel safe with us. They feel confident that whatever decisions come out of this, it's going to work for them and for us. And you hold that intent. And that's not the truth either. That's just a different perspective amongst a zillion perspectives. So they hold that perspective because it's one that everybody will win at. And they hold it. And the interesting thing is the intent shapes what you say. But more importantly, the intent shapes how you're heard. And this is really important because all of a sudden they will start to experience that it is safe to go outside of the book. It is okay to not go by the rules and be focused on what will work for everybody. And that's one of the ways we would coach them. And magic starts to happen. Surprising results happen. Collaboration takes place. And even the most stuck people come up with the most brilliant ideas that support everybody. That's how we would use intent to create, to influence the relationships that we have. But you can only do it when you recognize that whatever thoughts you're having about them is not the absolute truth. Because if you're operating from an absolute, then that's it on that. There's nowhere to go. The best you can do is dominate, manipulate, force them, bully them, fight with them. It will have only demonstrated to the book people that they got to stay by the book. And that's how the evidence gets created over time. So hopefully that sort of makes some sense in terms of how we would use intent to offset a thought that we may be having. First thing is recognizing that just because I'm having this thought doesn't make it the absolute truth. What other thought, what could I create here that could potentially be going on for that other person?
And that's a really short-term view because you get those immediate results. And each of those immediate results, when we are choosing, we automatically align and the choices become clearer, quicker, and come from outside of ourselves, our teams that are in line with our 1 year, 3 year, 5 year strategic plans.
And what else it does is it strengthens the relationship because the other party actually feels that you knew what was going on for them. They actually have that experience. So where before the relationship was very awkward and difficult and nobody really looked forward to talking to each other, all of a sudden they become, friends and they're excited to be with each other because they know they can get things done together.
In companies where people have worked together for many years, or in partnerships in small business, and where they're in partners, but they've got their stuff on each other, all the judgments and everything. And we see it shift like that, instantaneous. And I did want to make a point. When you hear people say, oh, you create your reality, and is this thought creates reality, and I tried that and didn't work. You have to understand the dimensionality of life. So what Alan's been talking about, there are no absolute fixed realities. We exist in fields. So we're not brought up in traditional education, which was born in the only physical is real 17th century view. It gave rise to the industrial age. So we didn't pay attention to the other aspects, what was invisible, even though the quantum and all of our technology is based on what we actually cannot see or cannot pinpoint, exact. We exist in fields. Now, it is science, but you don't have to be a scientist to experience it. You walk into a room, right? You can walk into, let's say, a boardroom or a conference room, and people were in a very heated debate in there. You can feel the energy of it. We feel each other. We can sense each other. So what Allan was saying about intent actually shaping how other people hear you. It's more than just words that we're saying, because you're holding this in your state of being. And we know about states of being. We're in a peaceful state, we're in a harmonious state, or not, or any of the other states that we're in. And we know, or what we call a bad hair day, like, oh, I woke up on the wrong side of the bed and everything went wrong. Why? Because that's your state of being. And we're attractive field forces. Whatever you're holding in intent for another person, for a group of people, it's for the relational field. And it is experienced in the non-visible, in the invisible. And so it's not spooky, but actually Einstein called it spooky action at a distance. That's a famous quote from Einstein. Like, how did that work? The quantum, but it does work that way, this instantaneous action. So that was one thing. How does intent work? Does my thought really create anything or not? In the relational field, in the field of mind, intent, emotional field, that's where there's an instantaneous shift. And we see it in little children. 1 minute they're crying their eyes out, screaming, and you're thinking, whose kid is that? And then the next minute, they're like, oh, I love that butterfly. And there's an instantaneous shift in state. What is mastery? The opportunity to use this characteristic of the quantum world that we live in, that we can have an instantaneous shift in state. Now, we know that in the physical, things take longer. So it's not like I had a thought, and Deepak Chopra used to say, and an ice cream cone showed up in my hand. No, you had to go to the ice cream store and buy it. But you get the idea, is since everything in nature happens through patterns of relations, and this is what is going on in all of our businesses. When we want to have a shift in our business, when you're quantum thinking, you know that you can have an instantaneous shift. A quantum leap means an instantaneous shift of state with no traceable pathway, how it got there. How did it get from that state to this state? Well, there's no explanation for it. It's just that is the nature of the quote quantum. And so what we do, QuantumThink is not about science. It's about how the discoveries of science, how we can use them to shape our thinking, and in everyday practical, well, what does this mean to me in my life, in my business, in my relationships, in my own relationship with myself, and how I feel about myself. And that's how it works, is you use these. And the tiniest step of awareness can make that instantaneous shift.
You are listening to the Voice of Bold Business Radio. This is program 134, Quantum Results in Real Time. And we are here with Dianne Collins, author of QuantumThink, and Allan Collins, master QuantumThink coach. And we're talking about so many of these pieces. This is even better than a book on tape where I get to hear your voice and people get to listen, because we get to dive in and look at this in a whole other way. And we've really been talking about the real-time result change by knowing that it's there. And one of the chapters in here is about mastery, success to mastery, which, by the way, in our program notes is a link to a fantastic article that Dianne and Allan have provided to me, because I want you to be able to have access to it as well. It will take you to Allan's LinkedIn page, where it gives this concept of mastery in another way. So take what you're hearing here, apply it with the reading that they've got. And by the way, I would recommend this book to everybody, the Do You Quantum Think, because we do. And in the mastery section, I actually have this circled. Notice, right? Ladies and gentlemen, you can hear me rustling my pages and moving my sticky notes. Something that we started this conversation with, and I'd like to come back to just for a moment to launch from it, and that is, quoting, if we only look from what worked in the past, we will be limited by it. And that's something that I wanted to make sure we bring up again, because results tell us where we've come from. They don't necessarily tell us where we are going. And we've been spending a lot of time about talking directly and indirectly around relational field, around perspective, around the fact that we create the context with our intention, the space around us. And if we're having a bad day, people are going to know it. And if we just came from a really awkward conversation and we're walking into a board meeting where we're the decision maker, people are going to pick up on that fact that there's something going on, and they're going to wonder if it has to do with the work that they've been doing. So us taking ownership of that. Another thing that I thought was really interesting that maybe we can talk a little bit about is, it's hard to define, because until you've been there, until you've practiced it, until you've experienced it, this level of awareness is elusive. There's another small paragraph that I want to quote here. Remember the last time that you accomplished something truly extraordinary? People ask you, how did you do it? How were you able to get all those sales? What did you do? And you're like, how do I answer that? And that right there, that moment identifies the quantum results in real time, does it not?
When somebody does produce a great result, people say, well, what did you do? But it's naturally not in the doing. even though there is doing going on, there's always actions, there's definitely actions, but that's not the source of the result. The source of the result is how you were thinking about it. And that doesn't get distinguished because this is what Dianne was saying before. We weren't educated in the arena of how the mind works. We were educated in things to do. It was all about doing, and there's a million how-to books out there. But the important thing is what's at the source of the result. And the source of the result is your intent. It could be a created intent that you put into place consciously with awareness, because you understood how these things work. Or it could be a default intent, which could be, well, I'm not sure if I can do this, but I'll do my best. That would be like a default intent. An intent is always at the source of one's results, but it's either a conscious intent, one created with awareness, or it's a default intent that is there based on thoughts you've had in the past, which is this success piece, but things you've done in the past that worked. Oftentimes people, do something, they get a great result, they try to do it again, and they don't get the same result. And that's why, because it wasn't in the action. It was in the thinking, but they weren't looking at the thinking, they were looking at the actions. And this is why this is so important.
So here I am working on a particular project, and I have a new packaging of some of the stuff that Red Direction does that I would like to put out to the world. And we're going to do a launch. And I decided that we were going to do this launch one Friday, actually 2 Fridays ago, the day that this airs, this coming Friday, on the 16th. And here I am. I'm like, okay, if you've read Good to Great, they've got the goal that would be okay, the real goal, and then the audacious goal. So I've made an audacious goal of how many people I want in that room. And as soon as I say, every single time I say it, here's my audacious goal. I know I can do this. And I want this many people in the room. There's this underlying thing that goes, I don't know if you're really good enough to do that. And so here I am, I see it. And if I were to practice, and I'm doing it in a way to articulate the work we're doing so far in our conversation here, is that I'm noticing it as it's showing up. I'm like, hi, what do you mean I can't do it? Yeah. What's my intent here? My intent here is to get people in a room. That's really not my intent. It's just my goal of measurement that shows me where I've been and did I do the work right. My intent is to deliver the value that I know that is in the program to as many people as possible all at once. Because when I can do that, that means the next step of the work that they need to do will become clearer. So my intention is around that. So I'm defaulting to that. So I have this audacious goal, number of people in a room. And then that little voice says, and I'm like, hi, little voice, I hear you. And I'm like, here's my intention though. And this intention trumps everything.
Right. Well, you've got to say, it goes back to knowing that that little voice that is challenging you is not the truth.
Right.
That's important to know that, because otherwise it's going to be positive thinking. And it doesn't mean that it won't work, by the way. It could work, absolutely. Yeah, no question about it, but it's not the strongest approach to things. The stronger approach is recognizing that the little voice is coming for a visit, as you pointed out, but it's not the absolute truth. And you can actually create anything you want. Now, that doesn't mean you're not going to take actions. You want a full room, and even the intent that you had, I would add a little piece to the intent. It's not about just necessarily giving all the value, which you will do, obviously. That's part of it. But beyond that, you want people to experience the value.
Yes.
That is the key right there. Is that is the real intent, is that you know you have something that is valuable, and your intent is that the people that come are going to experience this in their lives instantaneously, or whatever you want to say about it. But it's their experience that you have the power to create. And people don't really recognize that. They usually stay on themselves and say, well, I want them to get my value. Well, they will. And and that's great. It's not an either or, it's both. But it's important to include them, because part of the QuantumThink perspective, and this is not just QuantumThink, this is known, throughout forever, is that everything is interconnected and everything is interrelated, right? So if everything is interconnected and you create an intent for yourself, like you want them to get the value, that doesn't necessarily mean that they will. But if you create the experience for them, you would have to be in that experience to create it for them.
So it changes the behaviors I will take when I am doing this. All of us have been taught, there's some the current trend and buzz around this stuff does not take it to this next level that we are talking about, ladies and gentlemen.
Right.
This is the key, that magic space that is really hard to define, that means our success in replicating somebody else's plan versus figuring out what the right steps to do for us based off of the experience we would like somebody to have.
One important distinction that you made, Jess, is the distinction between intent and intention, which is one that I make myself to clarify, because distinctions are created, okay? Created to give us access to something. So intent being that experiential, in the moment, for the relational field that Allan was saying, and you say it in the present tense too, that it's already that way. And as Allan was saying, when you're creating for the relationship, it has to be in you for it to happen. But the distinction between intent and intention being an end result or the measurable results. So as you said, the audacious goal, I want X number of people to be in that room. So you could say those are the measurables, some of which that will come about as a result of your intent. That's what you were talking about just now. I wouldn't say it like a behavior change. I would say because you're holding that intent, that's where you are, is that I'm excited about that everyone is experiencing the value of what we're doing. You put that emotional charge into it to energize it a little. I'm excited about what that people are experiencing the value of what we're doing. And there's no specific in that, but it's open-ended, yet it's focused around, I don't know exactly what you're doing, so I put the words around it, but you're putting the words around it. If you confuse intent with intention, the measurement with the state, as Allan was saying, what's at the source is the state you're operating, the context you're choosing to operate from. That's the intent. And it's activating the field. So what we would say to you, and I'm saying it now, is that your intent will generate many results where intention, you'll either get it or you won't. But when you create from intent for the experience of the value that your new clients, customers are having, that is where what we would say in the quantum domain, you can see maybe 10% of what's visible, even what we can imagine. You could put that in the 10%. The other 90%, I'm using it metaphorically, is what bubbles up from what we cannot see. All those serendipities, all those amazing, we call it quantum occurrences. You will get results you couldn't see, Jess, as a function of your intent. But when you allow for it and you look for it, and it's because you're holding that intent for your customers, and you'll see it. And I'm looking forward to hearing about it.
I will tell you.
Okay.
I will make sure. Yeah. And this is really good because you're right. We set these SMART goals that are whatever SMART stands for or whatever goal setting plan we have. And it in itself is working on an outcome that we can measure, which you guys have shared that is limiting. And
yeah, but it's still good to have those.
I think you need them. We
Yeah.
just can't stop there is what I hear you saying.
Right.
Right?
Exactly.
To be boundless, we allow more in.
Each one of the quantum think distinctions, and as Dianne said, there are 21 of them that make up the system of thinking. Each one of the distinctions has a recreation to it for your awareness and for your mind, so that you can practice being aware about certain things and obviously about yourself. And the interesting one about success to mastery that I love is listening from not knowing. Now, this is really fabulous because you can listen from not knowing circumstantially. Like, for example, if I went to Japan today and I was in Japan and somebody was talking to me, I literally wouldn't understand a word. And that is a circumstantial not knowing. But here, what we're talking about is a little different. You can listen to another person, including yourself, by the way, where you consciously listen from not knowing that today, this moment, the very moment that that this is happening, is a new moment in time. No matter how the circumstances were, whatever variables were going on then, they're not going on now. This is a moment in time that is fresh. Every moment is fresh. So by bringing your listening to a place where you can actually listen to somebody from not knowing, consciously listen from not knowing, you will be amazed at what you hear. And even the people that you're the most familiar with, your husband, your children, your parents, your brothers and sisters, the people you work with and you've worked with for 10 years, and you're pretty sure you know what they're going to say at any given moment in every situation.
Like me, Allan, right? You do it with me.
Like you, absolutely. Dianne and I have to do this together all the time. But when you're consciously listening from not knowing, you will hear what they're saying in a fresh way. It'll be new in that moment, and it will open up a whole new possibility for how to work together, and and ideas that might be bubbling up here in the conversation. It will be heard in a completely fresh and new and exciting way, and people are always surprised pleasantly.
It makes me think about resiliency, that this practice, this thinking to think instead of thinking our thoughts are thinking. Well, say that a little fast.
I like that.
It's building resiliency. And when we're talking about organizational culture and we're talking about organizational change, this concept of resiliency is something that, from the smallest to the largest organizations, figuring out how to adapt quickly and invoke and create lasting change comes up. What are the benefits that come from, and does it really even build resiliency when we think about this concept of quantum results in real time in relationship to longevity and resiliency within an organization?
So we're always in the context of the ERA, ERA, that we're living in. And of course, the big buzzword in business today is disruption. And so when you think about the benefits, I want to give just a big picture view on this, Jess. Thinking as a system, right? The thinking system that's born from the 17th century, and that gave rise to machines. And then around, starting with Einstein and the quantum physicists that followed, gave rise to what? This quantum mind domain, with all that makes this technology that we're using right now possible. And you think, well, those habits of thinking from the old worldview gave rise to all of our institutions, right? The hierarchical corporations and the separation and the silo idea of, I'm accountable for this, but not for that. And all the things, and it's not bad. We're talking about, when you're quantum thinking, it's an expansion. It's being able to distinguish what thinking gave rise to what. But when you look at what's going on now in the world, and people are frightened, people are uneasy, people are freaking out in many cases, depending on, this is where it's very important to have that mastery way of being, because you need to hold your center in the midst of the chaos and change and transformation that's going on, and be a force in it rather than a victim of it. But what I wanted to say about this is, you look at the thinking that shaped our institutions is no longer sufficient to recreating them. And so when you say, what's the benefit, right, of the resiliency that this way of thinking gives you, it's tremendous, because you have the dynamics of what creates. You understand those dynamics of what creates any result. And so this gives you the confidence, and you have the resiliency when you're looking in the world and you don't like the politics, or you don't like the politics in your company, or you're worried about what happens to your business if you're a small business owner, and what happens in the economy, or am I going to be able to get a job if you're coming out of college, or trade school or high school, and all these things, all these circumstances, as we call them, that when you look in this picture that I'm talking about, you realize, oh, this is our human culture reshaping itself, restructuring certain systems that were born under an older, more limited way of thinking, as you said, about, yeah, we need goals, but let's hold our goals, and important to make them, and let's not be limited by them. If something shifts, maybe you adjust your goal, you make a new goal, you make it shorter term, longer term, whatever. But this is the idea, is that this can make everyone feel better about what's going on now. When you look at it, oh, now we need to more expansive way of thinking, because we're undergoing this restructuring of many of our ways of being in our institutions that we've become accustomed to in society. And this is what's going on. So to me, that's the benefit of the resiliency on the big picture. I'm sure Allan has a
I was
view
just
on
thinking when you were saying that, Dianne, wouldn't it be something if the politicians and the powers that be up there could look at the Constitution in that light? That because the Constitution was created in a different time, in a different worldview, so to speak, and we're still functioning in it. And no wonder people are arguing and fighting and shooting each other and everything. It's because maybe we need to relook at the Constitution in the light of where we are today. From a quantum worldview versus a mechanical worldview. Because things are going to change. And what we're experiencing, I think, today more than ever, is that they're impacting us. We always saw the change going on somewhat, but it wasn't happening in our neighborhood. It wasn't happening in our community. It wasn't happening in our job. But now it's happening right there, and where everybody's feeling the effect of it. I would say the resilience is in the arena of having an intent for personal mastery. I would say that's where the resilience really lives, because if you are resilient there, it will affect everything you do, versus like this particular thing or that particular thing, or whether it's personal business or whatever. But I think if you're on a personal mastery journey, that will provide you with the resilience to handle whatever comes at you, and wherever it comes from, and you'll sustain yourself through it, actually.
What makes it bold to decide and choose to go for quantum results?
Well, it's not so much bold about striving for quantum results. I mean, why not? I mean, why, as Dianne says, why be mediocre when you can be masterful? Being courageous is probably, the thing to, and having an awareness. I think when people have an awareness that being on a mastery journey is available to them, why wouldn't they take it? I mean, it would be ludicrous to not.
This is Voices of Bold Business Radio, Allan. And
yes,
here's what makes it bold to me, is that with everything that's going on in the world, there are three ways you could, at least three, infinite possibility universe, that you could possibly Be with the changes. Be with what's going on. You can stick your head down in the sand and pray that it's going to go back to the way it used to be. Not likely. You can deal with the changes as they're coming toward you. Like Allan says, you're going to have to deal with them. You know? Or you can be a force in the way the change and transformation goes. And that, to me, is being bold. Being bold in business is you knowing you are the force. May the force be with you. You're the force. You're the one who is the creative force, who is the force of action, because you know that you can make a better world.
You have listened to Dianne. You have listened to Allan. We have given you real life examples, not only from clients that they've worked with, but also just right here from me, Jess Dewell, that will shape the importance of what it means to become more involved with and aware of and have a relationship with thoughts and thinking thoughts. You're going to find the program notes for today's program, P134, at voiceofboldbusinessradio.com/P134. That is voiceofboldbusiness.com/P for program 134. You can also search the site, Quantum Results in Real Time. Rate this program, share your comments. The ideas and the feedback that you have for the Voice of Bold Business Radio shape who we bring on, the information that you're working with, the problems that you face, the learning that you want, because it's our actions, it's our experience, it is the way we are showing up that defines what being an effective leader today is. You can listen to the Voice of Bold Business Radio where podcasts are sold. Through our experiences, when you share some comments, make sure to know that Scott and I will be watching for that feedback, and we may share it on air. We will call you out, we will share what you have to say, and we will also show some gratitude and some extra love for that. What can you do to recognize when to change your thinking to get quantum results in real time?
Subscribe at thevoiceofboldbusiness.com and get more information, program notes, and past episodes. Bold leaders approach each situation and focus on action to achieve a higher level of leadership. Jessica Dewell, your business advocate, is the host of the Voice of Bold Business Radio. Thank you for joining us.